Hi, welcome to this video where we're going to have a look at the PESTLE analysis. Now, just stepping back for a second, the reason that we're interested in PESTLE, which is an analysis of the broad environment which might affect a business, is because of as shown on the slide here, in strategy and in marketing, what we're often interested in doing is trying to balance the organization with its environment. So obviously when we're doing strategy, when we're doing marketing, it's really important to think about the organization and what it's doing, and think about products and think about processes, and all those things are really fundamental to strategic management and marketing. But of course, we can't be successful in a vacuum. We need to put our product out there in the world. We need to put our product out there in the market. And of course, the environment is going to be the determining factor as to whether our product is successful or not. So when we think about the environment, we think of three things in general. We think about the broad environment, and that's the wide environment, which will be sort of determined by the culture of the nation state. So for example, in the UK, the culture of the UK and what's happening in that society. And of course, it could be Europe, it could be the USA, it could be China, it could be South Korea. Wherever you are, that society is going to be where your business is going to have to perform and deliver. Obviously, we're also interested in industry, and we're also interested in the actual market that we're operating in. Now, PESTLE is particularly focusing us on that broad, wider societal environment. So we look at things like the politics, the economic situation, the social, the environmental, the legal, and those sorts of things. And obviously that sets a broad context for our business. Now, the extent to which our business actually is affected by that broad environmental context will depend on the business. Some businesses are not really going to be affected that much. They seem to sort of continue year to year without having a great impact. Some businesses are heavily impacted, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so if we think about a sort of general business strategy method, or if you're going to go and do a strategy project, you're probably going to follow these sorts of steps, and I'll talk about this in a different video. We'll start off understanding the business. We'll try and understand the nature of the business, but then in step 3, or fairly quickly in your business strategy project, you're going to do some kind of formal review of the environment, and it's that where the PESTLE analysis will be helping you out. So when we think about a formal review of the environment, like I said before, we're probably going to be interested in the PESTLE analysis, which we're going to talk about in this video. We're probably also going to be interested in the industry, and we'll use something like Porter's 5 Forces, which I'll put on a separate video. And out of that, as a way of summarizing all of that, we're probably going to do some kind of an opportunities and threats analysis from a SWOT analysis, and that's a useful way of trying to bring this together and see whether what's happening out there in the environment is actually relevant to our business. Okay, so here it is, the PESTLE analysis, and it's really quite straightforward in the sense, P stands for political, E stands for economic, S stands for social, T technological, L stands for legal, and E stands for ecological. And of course, these are considered to be the main areas which might influence our business from that broader, wide context. So we'll have a look at each one of these separately. So political, obviously the political situation within a country is going to have an impact, sometimes drastically so. And of course, the political situation might also include, the wider global political situation as well. So, if something very significant happens in another nation state, that also might be affecting your business, especially if you're exporting. But of course, as we saw in the financial crisis 2008, that started out in the USA, but it soon spread around the world and impacted businesses all over the world. So things like in the UK at the moment, Brexit obviously is the dominant political feature. But things like elections, obviously the behaviour of political parties. We might also be affected by things like consumer protection, industry-specific regulations, competitive regulations. Obviously, this is driven by government policy, but it might be affecting our business, or it might not. Inter-country relationships, attitudes, obviously war. Obviously, if we're having some kind of a trade war with another country, that might affect our business. Political trends. Obviously, we've seen trends towards more popularism in the West recently, and of course that's influencing businesses to some degree. Governmental leadership. Obviously, if we get a really business-oriented leader of the country, then obviously that could be really beneficial for our business. And things like taxes and governmental structures. So most businesses will have a reasonably good idea of how sensitive they are to what's happening politically, but it might take us by surprise as well. So, for example, I think Brexit, for example, in the UK, has taken a lot of businesses by surprise. We didn't expect that to happen. Obviously, it goes without saying that the economic situation is likely to affect our business. Although it's not always obvious how that's going to happen. Some businesses do well when the economy booms. Some businesses actually do better when the economy goes down. So, for example, in the UK, supermarkets like Aldi do actually better in periods when people are actually struggling, because everybody has to eat, but we might start going to more to cheaper supermarkets, if we're feeling that it's a difficult time economically. So economic growth trends, obviously taxation, government spending levels, disposable income is obviously really, really important for some businesses. Obviously, if you're in the hospitality industry, so restaurants, then clearly if people are struggling and don't have disposable income, then they're not going to go to the restaurants. Job growth, unemployment, obviously exchange rates, tariffs, inflation. Consumer confidence index might be a way of trying to understand, how people are feeling. Obviously import-export ratios and production levels within the country. Obviously the economy is a very complex system, and most businesses are not going to be sort of analysing it in detail, but they'll be wanting to sort of have a sense of what's happening in the economy, and they should know how that might impact their business. Now, social and cultural aspects, can be really important. So things like demographics, age, gender, race, family size, etc., birth rates. For example, in my sector, which is higher education, the birth rates have been going up and down, and we see that filtering through into higher education, and we can predict that. Lifestyle changes, population shifts. These days things can happen quite quickly, and so we need to be really monitoring these more quickly and really have up-to-date real-time information on these things. Education, trends, fads, diversity, these things, might affect our business. Immigration, emigration, health, living standards, housing trends, fashion, attitudes to work, leisure activities, occupations, and earning capacity. All these societal, cultural developments, because we need to remember that society is always changing, always developing. We might not be happy with the way that it's developing, but it's always changing, and it always changes quicker than we think. There's a tendency for us to live within our generational cultural norms, and sometimes we forget that society's generations coming in below us will have different values, and different cultural norms, and we might not be aware of that day to day in our lives, but as a business, we really have to be up to date with our information on this. Now, obviously, technology has played a massive role in business. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, of course, but particularly in the last 10 to 20 years, technologies have played a big role, especially with information technology and the internet. So inventions, new discoveries, research, energy uses, sources, fuels, rates of obsolescence, health can be affected by technology, manufacturing advances. So for example, right now, many people argue that we're having another sort of industrial revolution right now in terms of things like artificial intelligence, robotics, analytics, those sorts of things. So biotech, genetics, agri-tech, things like waste removal and recycling. Obviously, how technology affects your particular business will be unique, and sometimes it's quite hard to forecast exactly how that's going to play out, but we need to be monitoring these things, and that's why it's part of our strategy projects. Now, obviously, legal frameworks will affect our businesses, national laws, regional laws, the legal system and the courts, law enforcement system, legislation. Now, hopefully, the legal side doesn't impact our business that much, and normally a business would be aware of what that would be, but obviously these things can change, and we need to be aware of those. Now, the environment has been a huge issue for many years, but particularly acute in the last 5 years. So things like weather, climate change, environmental policies. Obviously, a lot of governments are trying to take action in this area with more or less impact. Changes to operating practice driven by environmental concerns, policies, and legislation. So, for example, many companies right now are trying to review their energy uses, and that might have a big impact on the business. Okay, so that's just a quick run through the PESTLE analysis, just to give you a sense of that broader environment. Now, when you're doing your strategy project, I would suggest that you step back and run through the PESTLE analysis. You might find that some of the areas are not that significant. Some of the areas you might feel are very significant. Some of these areas might be, that there might be a lot of change in that particular area, or some areas there might not be that change in relation to your business. And it's important to remember as well, and it's one of the reasons why we like to do rich pictures, which I cover in another video. There might be other features of this broader environment which is not affecting which is not part of the PESTLE analysis. So just because something's not part of PESTLE doesn't mean it can't be really important. So if there is something else which hasn't cropped up in your PESTLE analysis but is still really important from that wider societal context, then obviously you need to take account of that in your strategy project. Okay, thanks a lot.